twofold. First and foremost is it's a wonderful day outside, so I thought I'd share it and share the wonderful weather with everyone. The more important reason, the more probative reason, is because my daughter's asleep and my desk is right next on the other side of her crib. We share a wall, so sometimes her voice wakes her up. So we're going to do it outside today to discuss the Karen Reed case. So we got a lot of interesting developments last couple of days. And this whole week, for example, apologies, I didn't have my show earlier this week, but I had attempted murder case that I was having to deal with, and several other cases, including a huge sale trial that I think is going to plead on Monday, which is huge because my client was looking at maybe 60 years in prison, and he's going to do 5 and change. So we're pretty happy with that. So I want to talk about the developments that had this week. Oh, also one more thing. I actually held my niece for the first time. So that was a pretty amazing experience. Obviously, it doesn't compare to holding my daughter for the first time, but anytime you hold a new member of the family, it's something special. So what happened this week? If you go online and you listen to some of the people who don't really know what they're talking about, they feel that every single thing is, oh, this is grounds for reasonable doubt. It's like, that's not how it works. You have to hear all the evidence from both sides, from the prosecution, from the state, to be able to ascertain whether or not there is a abiding conviction that this individual did not do what they have alleged to have done. That's pretty simple. That's what reasonable doubt really is in reality. At times, I think the defense wants to try to push enough. I think they've kind of given up on trying to overtly argue the conspiracy, because seeing as that juror from the first trial with the bow tie essentially saying that we didn't really buy it, and that person was pretty clearly on the side of the defense. If they didn't buy that, this jury isn't going to buy it either. So I think what they're trying to do is just put as much weird information out there so that the jury comes to that decision on their own. It's kind of like the idea of inception. Instead of placing it into, like, trying to convince something of it, instead they want to plant the idea into their head so they come to the realization on their own. And they're like, oh, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And if you don't hear from Michael Proctor and you don't hear from Brian Albert, like, oh, they're hiding. They're trying to essentially gaslight the jury into believing the conspiracy without actually presenting any evidence to that effect. So it's ridiculous. And every day it seems more and more silly. But what was important this week? I definitely think that getting into the evidence involving the taillight and DNA. So I've been asked a lot of questions like, oh, how does this prove that he was hit by a car? I'm like, well, trials aren't totality of the circumstances. They're not just one fact. It's like, oh, hear this, that means that person was hit by. That's not how it works. It's first, you see the DNA of Officer O'Keefe on the rear bumper. You have his hair on the taillight. You have his DNA. You have the pieces of the cracked taillight. I don't know if we got to that today about the clothing, but that eventually is coming, that the piece of the taillight are on his clothing. So when you put all of that together, and then it's the black box testimony, being able to see that the car was going in backwards reverse at 75%. Hank Brennan wouldn't have said all that during opening if he knew that's not what the evidence was going to show. That's your most surefire way to lose a jury's trust, is to say something in opening you don't back up. And it's just hilarious because the testimony yesterday is like, well, the Emmy is like, I didn't see impact in the lower extremities. It's like, you asked such a very pointed question so that you'd be like, oh, that means there's no vehicle strike. No, that's not what she said. She said the lower extremities, the legs. That doesn't mean where he was actually struck, if it's on his clothing, it would be pretty fair to say that he was struck higher up. It wasn't struck in the legs by the vehicle. So that's kind of disingenuous, and some of the attorneys online just trying to know, like, they clip like this very pointed 30-second clip. It's like, boom, JOA, and it's just like, oh my god, I feel like I'm watching that attorney's YouTube channel that did the Rittenhouse trial. Directed verdict. Like, stop. Like, really? That's not how it works. And it's like, that should be over with the case. I was like, it's not how criminal trials work. And when they move for a judgment of acquittal or judgment a directed verdict, whatever it is, um, it's going to be denied. So that's not how trials work. Um, so when you hear that, it's a totality of the circumstances. Every piece of evidence builds on each other, and it was nice seeing ADA Lally today, because it's kind of it's like finishing what he started. Because yeah, he was definitely overmatched in the first trial, but he did his best. He was going up against the entire dream team in the first case himself. And this time, Hank Brennan's taking the lead, and Lally comes in and helps out where he can, which is good, because it's a huge trial for any one person to try to handle. But let's talk about what we actually heard and why it's significant. There was trial yesterday about how the injuries, the rib injuries, were likely caused by resuscitation efforts. So that's a very important piece of evidence to get in, because the defense, without it, the defense was like, well, he was beat on his body. But if those rib injuries are from resuscitation, now they've eliminated all the trauma to his entire body, that of a place where they could have done this so-called beating. And explaining it's like, oh, undetermined versus cause of death. Like that's not how it works. Cause of death is, why did the individual die? Manner of death is one of the 5 options discussed. And the ME just couldn't say whether or not it was homicide or, like, say, accidental or something else. That doesn't mean it's like, oh, reasonable doubt. No, that's not. Because when you talked about third-party culprit, when they want to get into that, it's like that they would have wanted the homicide ruling, because then they could leave open that possibility. By making it undetermined, they can't actually, the ME is saying, I don't know if it was homicide. It might have just been an accident. That's what a vehicle strike would be, an accident. And so when they were cheering that, that's how little some people know about criminal law and criminal trial law. And it's like, oh, this fact, it's like, how does that prove? It's like, it in itself, this needs to be said. One single fact in itself does not actually prove something. It goes to the totality of the circumstances. Let's give the pedestrian strike, for example. The presence of the taillight on his clothing, put it together with the hair above the taillight, on his DNA on the bumper. People are like, oh, it's just touch DNA. I'm like, what is he doing touching the bumper randomly? Touch DNA is not going to stay there for an extended period of time. He didn't get out of the car and start swatting his hands on the rear bumper for whatever reason, creating all this touch DNA. That's just a forced and speculative doubt, and just people who don't know anything and don't know how criminal trial actually work. But I think the the discovery, like, witnesses were important, because Attorney Alassi, when he cross-examines, he asks some good questions. Like yesterday, I think he was asking about the touch DNA. Those are good questions to ask. But then he always just loses it. He always just goes off on a tangent, thinks he's Barry Scheck, thinks he's making all these important points. And by the end, you're just like, what did you want us to take away from that? That's different than Hank Brennan's style. Hank, like, by the time I'm watching his testimony, sometimes I turn it on and it's almost already over and the witness just started. But he was able to get all of the evidence out with the questions, because every single question is pointed to elicit a fact that's going to move forward the case. Alassi, I remember, did his cross-examination, I think a couple days ago. I want to say it was early this week. And he's doing a lot of ums, and he was doing Dr. Scotty. And you could tell he wasn't getting what he needed. And he's just winging it. You should never be winging a cross-examination. You should be writing down questions, because it's limited to what is asked on direct. So whatever Hank Brennan asks on direct are fair game for cross-examination. And that's where your questions are. And Attorney Alassi should know exactly what Attorney Brennan is going to ask. That's what Attorney Brennan is so very good at. He knows what he's going to ask. He knows who's going to cross and how they're going to cross. And he already has his redirect questions already prepared, because he knows what points they're going to make. That's why he was brought in to actually try this case, because he knew how Alan Jackson, David Yannetti would think. And they bring in Alassi, and then the juror consultant, who was like disappeared, which was strange, but whatever. It is what it is. So when you think about that kind of preparation, it's just every single question. People are like, oh, they're hanging, like the people who just report on what the jurors are thinking. It's like, you don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what their facial reaction, what they're actually saying. Like, oh, that's surprise. I was like, huh, that's interesting. But it's the whole case by the Commonwealth is based on facts, DNA, digital forensics, as opposed to conjecture. So it's not going to get better for the defense. It's like, oh, just wait for the defense's case. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, that's what we do. We don't make a determination about guilt until we've actually heard from all the facts and evidence. That's how it works. That's how reasonable doubt works. It's not you've already made up your mind. And unfortunately, a lot of people have. You look on there and they're just trying to get confirmation bias. And that's like the most dangerous thing when you're dealing in a criminal case and trying to present every fact, only put forward your idea of what the evidence. Most of these people who have been in my comments, and I can't even respond to 90% of them just simply because they're ridiculous and they're just anonymous people. But they don't know, in the first trial, I actually acquitted the defendant of murder because I didn't think the case was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I said as much, and it wasn't. And I'm still waiting to see the black box evidence. That's where it is. Like, we heard the angry voicemails the first time. And we heard that it's with the story, it kind of, the theory might make sense that the defendant thought Officer O'Keefe was cheating on her, and then he ended their relationship, and she wasn't going to be broken up with. That's a plausible theory, but it's just a theory. It's not a fact. So the black box evidence from the vehicle is going to be able to say, was there a pedestrian strike? What time did it accelerate? What time did it reverse? And all of that will be introduced. Evidence is like the ingredients of a recipe. Yep, exactly. And that's what it is. It's not one single thing that makes or breaks a case. It's just really not. It's a plethora of things, especially when you're trying to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. So when I hear all of this, and it's like I can only get to so many people because I have a job, I have a life. So I can't respond to every single individual who talks about as like, oh, well, like they complain about the same thing. It's like, all right, that's fine. And those are reasonable things. But it's about whether or not reasonable doubt as to whether the defendant did this, not saying it's like, oh, well, since these reasons, you can't find this individual. I don't care if they did it. It's like, it's not how it works. So hearing about yesterday with the discovery violations, I cannot believe Attorney Alassi did what he did. I know he's trying to put on a good show, but like, find another issue. Discovery violations by expert witnesses. You guys wrote the book on that. And you've been chastised for the judge from basically hiding your findings, pretending they're independent, when in reality there's emails where the ARCA witnesses are asking Alan Jackson, oh, should I say this to the feds and should I say that? It's like, all of that's coming out. All of that is going to go to credibility, and the jury's just going to be looking at them like, okay, you guys are really just going to be paid to say whatever they want, right? Your results aren't really based in fact, because what's going to happen is like, oh, the feds get involved. It's like, yeah, the federal investigation was closed. So do you want to go into that too? It's going to make your case look more and more ridiculous. Yes, Alassi was performing for his audience and the supporters of the defendant. It was, but it's just, and he's just lucky he walked out of there with the judge without slapping him across the face with, like, you're really going to stand here in the height of hypocrisy and argue about violations, discovery violations on behalf of expert witnesses? Really? Do you want to change? Do you want to, reviewing the trial transcript and from a month ago, refresh your recollection? Yeah, Hank said he didn't know what Alassi was talking about. Yeah, Alassi, I think sometimes he is maybe a little too smart for his. He doesn't know how to articulate information and put it in a way that a lay person can understand. He can't ask questions that would actually elicit the answers that he needs. He usually does it only about a third of the time. And the rest of the time, he's just spinning his wheels. Yeah, some YouTubers call him for a mistrial. Oh, good. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And it would have been a situation where they would have done it again. And the defendant can only get so much money from these people for the defense, because at some point, Alan Jackson's like, I have other things to do. And if he got a mistrial again, I don't think he would come back for a third. I don't know if David Yannetti, and then the defendant is going with other attorneys who don't nearly know these facts as well as they should. And this case is so highly complex about it that you really this is your shot. But I've said before, every time they make a point, all they do is just play the documentary, and the defendant herself throws cold water on any point that was previously made. And it's just going to continue throughout the case. It's long over. They have 400 hours. I don't know how much they're going to put in. Brennan versus Arca, yes. When the judge said, it's like, I think the only cure for this is a rigorous cross-examination. I'll translate. When a judge says that, the judge expects that that especially ADA Brennan's going to eat Arca alive. And there's going to be nothing really left. So whatever their findings are just going to be dismissed. Because remember, it is expert witnesses are opinions. And juries, in their jury instructions, have the right to accept the opinion or reject it. Yes, the gravy train is drying up. And it's just the defendant herself just trying to like when she texts in court. If my clients ever had a cell phone on and they're doing that in front of the judge, I'd snatch their phone away and be like, don't remotely do this. Whatever you may think of this case, the judge is here, the victim's family's here, your family's here, prosecution money is being spent, literally. You got to take it at least seriously. Do defendants in trial do defendants in trial do text on a phone, whenever a laptop, make faces? I've seen it, and it's very seldom, but I don't know if Alan Jackson and David Giannetti can control the defendant anymore. I just don't, because like how I feel like it's almost like an act, like playing to the crowd, and it's just like, oh, like look at this, and Jen McCabe, and when she flipped off the jury, and people being like, oh yeah, the Brennan and Cannoni did that. I was like, stop. Like you're embarrassing yourself talking like this. Rumor, yeah. So it's just telling them talking points she wants them to discuss. It's getting to the point where I don't know how Alan Jackson is just like, if you want to, don't talk to me during cross-examination. When I say, man, have a moment, you can bring it up to me. But she's like telling them to ask questions during the middle of cross. And it's like, don't do that. That looks ridiculous. And you look like Alan Jackson doesn't look like you have client control, and the defendant looks unhinged. And it is like a situation where it's just like, oh, it's embarrassing that she's here. And people being like, I would be way worse. She's conducting herself. It's like, okay, cool. What are you expecting me to say? It's my understanding the Lassie has never tried a case, let alone a criminal case. Why in the world make him the lead attorney? He's not really the lead attorney. He's the lead expert attorney. So Alan Jackson is first chair. David Yanetti's just kind of there once, and he talks once in a while on an inconsequential witness. So Alan Jackson handles cross-examination for fact witnesses, and it looks like Alassi is going to handle cross-examination for expert witnesses. Can you explain the sequestration order that was mentioned at the hearing? Sequestration is something that is ordered with witnesses. So any kind of trial, here in Florida, what we do is we invoke the rule of sequestration. Once you do that, witnesses are not allowed to talk to each other about the facts of the case and talk about their testimony. So an example would be Brian Albert or Brian Higgins can't talk to each other about the testimony. A couple of cops can't talk to each other about the testimony. And that's because they don't want the testimony to be tainted by, it's like, oh, I just said this. I was like, oh, okay, I'll make sure my testimony conforms to that. So sequestration is a situation where all witnesses are under a gag order not to talk to each other about they can talk to the attorneys, and it stays in place until they're released from their subpoena at trial. So you think Apencher listened to Whiffen? I think based on what I was hearing from Hank Brennan about Apencher, is they got the results and kind of the expert findings from ARCA, and they are just defy logic. And I think that's what you're going to get from the expert witnesses, that they're looking at a situation where they'll like, I'm having a hard time rebutting this because I don't know where they're basing any of these facts on. And the problem with it is, and so this is going to be a real problem for ARCA this time around. The first trial, they were only given enough information by Alan Jackson, David Yannetti, to say what they wanted to. And 88 Lally, commendably in the first trial, was like, did you know that they found pieces of the tail light in the clothing? No. Did they find this? No. Did you? They were given enough information to say what they wanted them to say. In this case, now they've been aware of that fact. So it's either they're going to have to take that into account with their findings and basically try to uh, fit a square peg into a round hole. Because when that happens, it's either they uh, now know all these facts and going to use their findings and it's just going to be all over the place, or they're again going to disregard what they all the evidence and only base their findings on what puts forward their opinion. And Hank Brennan's just going to eat them alive, and I think Judge Canoni knows that. And so that's kind of like, yeah, no, allow them in. It's like, we'll deal with this. The comment directed the jury about making facial reaction. Would you ever be reason to remove a juror for such conduct in court? I think one of the only situations where we've removed a juror is, so it was I think it was a theft case I was handling, and one of the jurors worked at a law firm, and he like told us about how he had medical doctors coming in for depositions and they don't like to be waiting. So basically he was telling us that serving on the juror was not worth his time. And he was just acting like a dude, like a asshole for lack of a better word. And so we go up there to the judge and like, let's just bounce this guy, go with the alternate. We're not dealing with this. So that's kind of what it is. And if those individuals with the facial reactions, they could potentially remove them from the jury. And if they are supporters of the defendant, that's not what they want, because then it'll go to an alternate, and that alternate is a situation where that alternate might not be as sympathetic. Potato cannons. What the hell is that? I have no idea what that is. Judge should have told Karen to control her behavior or facial. Yeah, she did. It doesn't go anywhere. It's a situation where I think the judge is of the opinion that allow the jury to decide. It's like the more she says it, she brings it up. She can bring it up in front of the jury, not in front of the jury. It's not going to change. I think the defendant is still acting the same way she did last year. But the judge knows from all the years of being a defense attorney, she knows the jury watches her and constantly during evidence. So whenever there is a bad fact, they're like, oh, you actually might have done this. Jurors take turns looking over because they have to think in their head, is this person capable of doing what they are alleged to have been doing? During yesterday's redirect with the ME, what was the point that Brennan was trying to make by asking her, do you know this in fact, but still came to an undetermined manner of death? It's wanting to, so the reason you ask that is so that on cross-examination, I think it's like, oh, did you know this fact or that fact? And she knew all of that and then still made it undetermined. Because she didn't, then the jury's like, oh, well, that might have changed her analysis. It could have been something else. And then you get the jury starts asking questions that they probably shouldn't be and teetering on speculative or imaginary doubt, which you don't want. Brennan said the Archer expert started looking to Archer testimony, and he has already seen something he needs to test because he doesn't understand how. Yeah, and that's what I figured was going to happen. In the first trial, like I was just mentioning, ADA Lally asked the ARCA witnesses, did you know this fact? No. Did you know this fact? No. And these were all like important facts that would lead to a conclusion that there was a pedestrian strike. So I have to think that they got all the information now because they knew that they couldn't get away with it again in this trial about all the facts that Alan Jackson, David Unetti omitted. And so now they're, with all that information, now they're trying to come up with a new theory of it. It's just going to likely come up to, it's just going to be a ridiculous situation. And when the jury hears that, they're not going to believe this witness. They're not going to believe ARCA whatsoever. Because it is. It's like the conspiracy is gone. And then if your theory that there was no pedestrian strike is just defied logic, the jury's just going to be like, okay, how do we ignore all of this evidence? Yeah, Trooper Michael Proctor and this did wrong in the investigation, but how do we ignore all of this? We can't. It's like it's an unfortunate situation. When that happens, jurors usually do kind of compromise verdicts, or they're like, I don't know if murder works, but maybe something a lesser included would. So like kind of like manslaughter. Brendan mentioned that Arca has 12 new, and it's just it's gonna look as ridiculous as it sounds, for lack of a better term. And that's why Judge Canonia was like, yeah, we're just gonna allow him in because she knows it would be reversible error. And she doesn't want to do this again. This is the last like 3 years of her life that she's been doing this case, and judges want to move on and do something else. Um, what's up with Karen staring down Hank? Crazy. He, she just, I think it's just to show like, oh, what are you doing? You're like, I'm a political prisoner and all this stuff. And it's like, no, he's the prosecutor in the case. You're the defendant. He's doing his job. Like, what are you expecting him to do? Yeah, it's nice to see some common sense in this case. Yeah, unfortunately, the truth has been a casualty of war in this case, for lack of a better term. A lot of people, especially content creators, they don't like to be told, "Oh, your opinion's wrong." And I'll tell you a story. I had a high-profile celebrity call me up and tell me about how this individual posted like one. Somewhat negative thing about the Karen retrial, and this individual was attacked relentlessly. It wasn't even, it was an innocuous comment. And it's just like, you can't say anything. It doesn't matter. That's why when I discuss case, I just keep it in the facts and evidence. And I give my opinion as such, because you're not going to be able to come in unless you're telling those people exactly what they want to hear. They're not going to believe you. They're not going to agree with you. They're going to say, how are you a criminal defense attorney? You are a traitor and all this. Some of the stuff ridiculous. I had people post fake reviews on my Facebook page. People who never had clients, like, oh, I had him represent me, and then they have some like random area code from another place. And it's just like, come on, guys, really? During trial, Karen and her dad are constantly glaring at the jury. Security now sits beside the dad babysitting. They think they want somebody booted off. Yeah. It's just such a bad look. It makes them look worse. It's not a situation. It's not somebody sympathetic, and it doesn't look like somebody who's railroaded. By acting like this, it doesn't make them look defiant. It doesn't make her look defiant doing all this stuff. It makes her look like she doesn't give a shit. And makes her look like, oh, well, are you really that laissez-faire about this? Is this how you're treating? I'm missing 8 weeks of work to be a juror on your trial, and you're there effing around, shooting dirty looks to everybody, making faces. Like, maybe it is possible. She doesn't realize that jurors look at everything. The documentary isn't doing good, but they can also see what's right in front of them. And with the flipping off, and this is something I said last week, the act of the flipping off thing, that's what cold-blooded like murderers do and stuff like that, they know they're going away, so they want to get off while they still can and have their fun. When I saw it, I was like, there's like, I don't know how many cameras in this room, and you're trying to pull this and try to make it sound like, because when she actually did it, I'm looking at it like, all right, was she trying to scratch her eye? No, she did it and then tried to play it off so she had plausible deniability. It was pretty clear, and anybody who saw that whatsoever. Yes, exactly. It will. No matter what you say, it's like, oh, they get convicted, wait for the appeal. And then it's like, oh, well, SJC, Supreme Court isn't going to let this stand. The Hague isn't going to, well, God's, like, you guys are ridiculous. This is the same people in the Delphi murders case who are like, oh, well, they didn't do this. This is ridiculous. Like, stop. And Brian Kaltenberger is also being framed as well. Not everybody is being framed. Sometimes people did exactly what they were accused of doing. I haven't made a determination here in this case because I wait till all the evidence is presented, but stop with any kind of conspiracy or some kind of cover up. Did you discuss Alessi making the jurors feel sick after lunch, showing them autopsy? Yeah, so that was a huge tactical mistake. So when you're doing a criminal case, when you right before lunch and right after lunch is not when you want to do information where you want them to pay attention, nor do you want them looking at something that's going to make their stomach turn. That's what happens when you don't do trials. You would wait on that, wait till their stomach settle. You usually have to wait about an hour after lunch to maybe do that. That's probably the best situation. Uh, but it's just I don't know if he understood like how to trial strategy and when to time asking questions, and it's just those small details, nitty gritty details. Um, yes, I honestly think the defendant believes that if she acts this way, it'll make her look defiant, and make her look like a martyr, like a political prisoner. I think that's best. I think that's the best way to describe um, how the defendant's acting was to cause stress. Yeah. And oh, yeah. And posting pictures of the niece and nephew was vile and disgusting. It's like these are minors. The cameras aren't allowed in, and they weren't allowed to even live to it. They were able to take notes and read them later. It's because minors, you don't want them being subjected. No minor should have to be subjected to this kind of stuff. It's like it's bad enough. This girl lost her mother, father, and then her uncle who was took her in then dies, and you want to try to you're trying to vilify her, make her. That's why the defense couldn't even cross her, because there was nothing. There's no situation where they could get anything out of her. There's no point. And thankfully, they took that message, and they didn't do the act they did this time with Peggy O'Keefe, where Alan Jackson goes to the podium and says, "I want to say how sorry I am. I have no questions," to try to build sympathy with the jury. Everybody read that play. It was good theater, but it was. Yannetti did cross the knees very seldomly, not really. It was a situation across. When I think of a real cross examination, I think of just what Alan Jackson is asking, like asking a couple of, I think it maybe was 5 minutes, and you might as well have done nothing. That it gave no purpose. It had, so when I say they didn't do a cross, that's what I mean. There was nothing that came out of that actually helped the case. Do not ask questions that you don't need answers to. So it is pretty simple in this case. So I think that it was the right. So the expert witnesses are coming in the case. So for the Commonwealth, it'll be interesting to see, because it's going to see a more definitive timeline. And I think I got a few more questions before I'm going to head out. What's your thoughts on Cannonian's instructions about faces and noises on the jury? It's interesting to say the least, because um, it might be a situation where some jurors might actually get bounced, because, like, have you already made up your mind um, before hearing all the evidence? Because if you have, I don't know if you can deliberate, because that's not how trials work. Um, did you see her reaction to the ruling? She was raging with Alessi just doesn't know how to accept anything that doesn't go his way. And that's just not how it works. Like, we have professionalism standards in court, and you may not agree with them, but you got to respect them. Um, but I have a question about procedure. Wondering how attorneys are able to ask questions they call witnesses, rebuttal versus case in chief. Okay, this is a great question about procedure. So in any case, there is a case in chief. So the prosecution has a case in chief, and then the defense puts on their case. A rebuttal case is when somebody on the defense makes a point. You have the ability to call somebody else to be able to introduce rebuttal evidence to rebut that testimony. I think a perfect example, the defense is going to call the animal expert that's saying it's not a dog, but those are animal attack and this, that, and the other thing. I think that in the prosecution's rebuttal, they might call Dr. James Crosby to say, it's like, that's not an animal attack. And then the situation was like, okay, I don't know if I believe the defense witness, and she didn't do really good last time around. I wasn't really convinced, so I don't know if it's going to go much better this time around. Uh, Yannetti asked the niece why she calling Karen the defendant, and they went to the nails done. She helped with homework. Is she Yannetti? This is why you don't ask stupid questions. That provided nothing. It didn't humanize the defendant. Really, it's like, oh, they did this, but the whole point of her testimony is that things had gone south. The relationship had run its course, and that's where it kind of leads into where the case eventually goes. That was the whole point. Yannetti kind of missed that. But he was just trying to get some good testimony to rebut the what the niece was saying about the trip to Aruba um, makes her look like a jealous type, and it could be a potential theory. So, like I said, when I said, "Oh, yeah, didn't cross," that's kind of what I mean. There was no, It's not like a situation didn't ask questions. Like they didn't ask real questions. There was no point to that cross. Can Karen wear an earphone getting information? No, she can't. That's why she has to go up to sidebar. It'd be ridiculous if she was. That it's just at times I think it's got to be ridiculous if she's doing that. Like she's getting word what's going on online. How is it playing? What are the YouTube long crime polls? It's just ridiculous stuff. But with that, I think that's where we're going to end it for this week. I'm going to be back on Monday. I think we're going to do Mondays and Wednesdays for the next couple of weeks, just simply because of where my trial schedule is at. But yeah, for now, thank you for joining in. This has been Live with Tympanic Law, Special Edition, lunchtime. Thank you.